Hey everybody, what's happening? This is Keeping It Real Fishing, and I'd like to just share with you a few thoughts on some of the braids that I've used this year. These two right here are 40 pound, these two are 50 pounds. You'll notice on my Daiwa and the T3 Ballistic I don't have any line on it. I had been using this one right here, the Power Pro Slick 8. I actually got 2 seasons out of that, but this reel is going to be going back to Daiwa. I'm having an issue with it. And some time ago, I've taken it out of my rotation now. Some time ago I took the line off, and I didn't think about making this video until after I'd taken it off, and so I don't have it here to show you, but I can kind of tell you my observations on that line. Alright, the first thing I want to mention, guys, is if you're not familiar with Braid, or maybe if you've only used one, I'll just give you my 2 cents on something I see a lot on forums, and particularly places where people can review it. Like Tackle Warehouse or Land Big Fish or any of the major retail sites. I'm always a little skeptical, and I take people's reviews with a big grain of salt, because if you've seen reviews online or really anything, reels, for every person who loves it, there's a person who totally discounts it and says it's the worst thing. And it's an interesting dynamic to reviews, right? Because we really are kind of motivated when people say great things about something. We're like, oh wow, you know, they said it, they're a normal person, right? It's not somebody who's being paid for it. And the same with negative reviews. You hear someone say, you know, I had such a horrible experience with it, it really gets to you. Well, that's the issue though. On a lot of sites, you may have people for the companies putting in either reviews, you know, pro reviews for it, or they may actually be kind of bad-mouthing a competitor. Now, I'm not saying that's prolific or, you know, that we see a lot of that, but I can't help but to wonder sometimes when I see these reviews. And I mention that with regard to snapping. Braid is really strong stuff. It's going to be 8-strand. A lot of our braids now are 8-strand. Some of the older ones are 4-strand. I'm not sure on this one here. Maybe someone can tell me. I've suspected that this is a 6-strand, the Suffix Performance Braid. I meant to contact them, but maybe someone can confirm. But anyway, they're all really, really strong, and they're not liable to snap very easily anyway. The only time I've ever really snapped braid was not on any of these, but I was using Berkeley Nanofill in a spinning reel for some time, and it was probably after my 6th or 7th snap that I said, okay, you know, this is not a one-time thing. You know, I see a pattern. This is real. This is happening, and so I moved away from that. But that's not a true braid. In true braids, in these, and I've used some others in the past, I don't get that. I can't even tell you if I've had an actual snap off. I don't think I have. You know, braids are liable to snap upon a sudden impact because there is no stretch when there's a lot of energy, namely when you're casting. If you're casting, say, a little bit of a heavier lure and you're really whipping it hard, and say for some reason, like just a half a second after you let go and the bait's whizzing out there super fast, you accidentally engage the reel, you turn the crank maybe by accident, that's the kind of energy that could potentially snap a braid. It would be a whole lot of energy just all coming to the weakest point, which would be the knot. It's possible, but I've even done that a handful of times by mistake, really whipping something out there going for distance, and I actually touched the handle, and it sounds like your reel is going to explode, but I haven't snapped my braid doing it, and that would be the instance where it happens. So, I know I'm really going on with that, but I just wanted to address that, the whole braid snapping thing. I'm sure some of you have had an issue with that happening. I just want to tell, you know, those of you out there who maybe don't have a lot of experience with braid, it hasn't been mine. And I've used, like I said, these and others in past years, and I just don't see it. So that's the main thing here, guys. Don't get too hung up on someone saying, "Oh, this one's stronger than this one, stronger than this one." You know, I use 2-pound tests. I use 50 pound. These two are 50, and these two are 40. And I use that for everything. And like even the 40, I was using this for frogging and heavy cover, and I've never had a snap. You know, dragging things through logs and timber and everything. I mean, it is 40 pounds, guys. I remember, like, it was only the you know, the early 90s or whatever. Well, you might not have been fishing in the early 90s, but it wasn't that long ago that, you know, Berkeley trilene, like extra tough and 17 pound, was considered like a heavy, heavy line. These are heavy, heavy lines, guys. So um, I kind of laugh sometimes when people are doing this frogging and flipping and they're into like 60 or 70 pound tests. I don't know, I guess if you have $1 million riding on it, if you're a professional fisherman. But for myself, I've used the 40 pounds in all conditions, and I've never had a snap off. And I can't imagine that I'm just that lucky. I think it's just that the lines are that strong. So that's just my little rant on strength of braid. Don't get hung up on it, guys. Go for the braid that you like in terms of other factors. And that's what I'll talk to you now about. The other factors with braid, if we're going to, or if I'm going to assume that most of them are very, very strong, are how limp it is, if it makes noise going through your guides, and that noise is going to come from if you can actually feel the braid. Some braids you could actually feel kind of the knot in it. Others are so fine. The braids that these are so fine you can't feel it. And then there's some which kind of try to mitigate a rough braid and putting a coating on it. So you have three classes of braid there. I wouldn't say one is necessarily better than the other. Again, they all work fine. But it's just if that bothers you, the sound of the line, you know, the classic braid, you know, coming through the guides, it's quite distinctive. And I don't know, if it bothers you, then you don't want to use those kind of braids. Let me tell you a little bit about the four that I have here and where they fall into each of those categories. The Suffix Performance Braid, I'll just give you a little bit of a close-up here. Okay, the Suffix Performance Braid in 50-pound test is, it does have a little bit of a coating on it. I'm not sure on the strands. Like I said, I think this might be a 6-strand, which would be unique. There was a little bit of a coating on it, not that much. In terms of color retention, that's another big thing too, guys. I don't have any left in the spool here to show you, but this one did lose its color rather quickly, but it wasn't that dark to begin with. So it wasn't like you see the samurai braid there, and it seems like a much darker green than this, but this one wasn't even that color to start. So this one did drop a few shades. I may have a picture of this. I'm going to see if I can roll in a picture of this when it was new. I think I thought enough to take a picture in preparation for this video. But yeah, color retention on this one, not so hot if that's important to you. You could always take a magic marker and color the last, 12 inches of the line if you want. You could do that repeatedly. Smoothness is very good. And it's I kind of put it in the middle in terms of how loud it is. It's not a super fine, super smooth braid, but it's not loud. And I guess, how can I put this into perspective? Okay, Power Pro, right? I think probably any store you go into will have Power Pro original, and you can probably find the Slick 8 stuff. So I'll use that as a reference point for some of these others, because I think we can all, or most of us will be able to feel that in the store, and you'll know where I'm coming from with this. This one is not as rough as the original Power Pro. You could definitely feel the braid in that when you run your finger over the original Power Pro. Not nearly that rough, but not as smooth as the Slick 8. It kind of falls in between. In terms of noise through the guides, you hear it, but it's not obnoxiously loud. Next one here is a samurai braid. Samurai braid falls into the camp of an uncoated line. So there's absolutely nothing on it, and they're very fine. I don't know if I'm assuming the individual fibers within that 8 strands are very fine. Now what I mean by that is that you have 8 strands, but then if you could look at, say you have 8 strands and you took off one of the 8, that strand in itself is made up of many small fibers, and what Daiwa has is kind of like microfibers all around. So if you ever have a chance to feel this, or if you pick it up, you're going to notice that the samurai braid is exceptionally limp. Tackle Tour did a very good review on it, and they kind of even knocked it for that. They said it was almost too limp. They were having some, I guess, more incidences of this line wrapping at the tip of the rod. It just kind of had a mind of its own, they said. I haven't really experienced that. It definitely is more limp, but I happen to like it. It is my favorite braid. It's very, very quiet. I don't hear anything on my rod. Even if you're really torquing it, if you're bringing a fish out of heavy cover, it's a very, very quiet braid. Again, guys, that really doesn't matter, but just, you know, if you care about the noise aspect of it. What I do like about it, though, unequivocally, is the color retention. Now, this one here seems comparatively dark when you're looking at it next to the Tough Line and the Suffix Performance braid, but the reason for that is that it has faded quite a bit, but it's that Daiwa dyes it so heavily when it's new. You see how dark that is. So that even after it's faded over the course of a season, it's still darker than a lot of your other braids. Okay, all braids are going to fade. Right, that color is going to leach out of there. So this is not a coating. It's actually in the fibers, you know, kind of interwoven into them. I'm not exactly sure, but it's not a coating that's going to come off. But as you see, it is going to change colors. But again, even though it's changing colors, it's probably going to be one of your darkest braids in comparison to a lot of the other ones out there. Alright, so that's the Daiwa Samurai braid. And this one is more expensive than most. I happen to like it the most. Like I said, I like the smoothness of it, and I like the color retention. I use it on a 40-pound test, and I really like this. I might actually even next year knock all my things down to 40. I know it seems counterintuitive for heavy application work, but I like the lighter ones. For me, they're just a little bit easier to work with. Talking about the Power Pro Slick 8. Now this one I do have in here. I don't have it on the reel to show you, but I do have some left. Now, Power Pro Slick 8 is a line that's coated. And so they do a really good job here of having this little strand on the outside, and you're going to feel that and you're going to say, "Ooh, wow, it feels so smooth." And here's the interesting thing about coated lines. When you first feel them, that coating is filling in all the little gaps. Let's take a look at this picture here. Like you see, there's a weave, and what you normally feel is that little minute space between the individual rope fibers. Very, very, very small, you know, like a fraction of a millimeter, but your fingers can perceive that. The coatings fill that in to make these feel incredibly smooth. But the coating will wear off, so they'll get a little bit rougher over time. But what the coating does from the outset, though, is it kind of makes it rigid. You see that? How it kind of just like sticks out there? It doesn't just like kind of fall. So you have that plastic there giving it a little bit of rigidity. Really doesn't have too much of a it's not a factor, I should say, in terms of casting. There's no memory in it, we could say that, but it's just something indicative of coated lines. Alright guys, telephone's ringing there. So Power Pro Slick 8, where was I? Again, talking about that coating on there. But this line, when I first put it on, and I used this for the first time, this was on 2 years ago, I put on my ballistic, and man, it just rocketed off there. It really did. It's very, very nice to begin. The only thing I'll say is, as this wears on throughout the season, what I noticed on this, more than I've noticed on other braids since, is that after this coating comes off, this one I've noticed fraying. You would have those fuzzies kind of all along the line, and not just at the end, you know, not the part that's getting high use, but all along the line, the part that was in the water. Eventually you do get more fuzzies and a little bit more fraying on this one than I've seen on the other ones that I've used. But again, I didn't have any breaks associated with it, but it just, by the end of the season, it was looking pretty rough. And the color of this one does really bleed out pretty fast. Like this right here is brown, but it turns darn near white after a couple months. So, you know, it does the job, guys, but, you know, just that's what I've seen on that one so far. Now, the Tough Line came heavily recommended. I've heard a lot of people say good stuff about it, saying it is really, really tough. But like I said, in my opinion, again, I haven't seen braids break. The Tough Line's niche is that you get a lot of it for cheap. This is 300 yards. I forget the price, but for 300 yards, I know it's less than 150 yards of the Samurai Braid. It's competitively priced, so that's a good part because these lines are not inexpensive. What I didn't like about it though was it's definitely the roughest of the bunch. Let me see if I could show you guys here. You can probably even see it there. I mean, you immediately can see actually the braid in it. And this is, you know, fine diameter stuff. You can notice that it's braided line. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I just wanted to show you guys what you're getting into. This line is the loudest line of the ones that I have here. Very, very loud coming through the guides. If you're pitching it or just whatever, you know, once you get a fish on, and if you have to really, you know, put some torque down and you're dragging it through some stuff, the more you torque it, the louder it gets through those guides. So it's just sound, but just be aware of that. Apart from that, we could look at the color retention on this one. This one came really, really light to begin with, and so there hasn't been a whole lot of change, although you will see a little bit of fading. So it's just a hair darker. It's kind of like a light green when you get it new, and it will whiten out on you a little bit, but you know, as you can see, it just wasn't that dark to begin with. Okay, so that's the color retention. And the last thing about the tough line is this one also does not have any kind of coating on it. So this one, similar to the Samurai Braid, it feels rough to the touch, but it's a very limp line because there's no coating on it. So, alright guys, that's it. I just wanted to give you a few thoughts on these lines here in case you're interested in them, or if you haven't gotten into braid yet and you're wondering what it's all about. Like I said, the main thing here is strength. They all have it. The color, the limpness, the coating, all that stuff is kind of really secondary. You know, it's just what's important to you. And yeah, that's it. So if you have any questions, guys, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks.